Franca, Papastem Tikasun. My name's Whitehorse. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about conflicting accounts of history that we know, especially here in northern Alberta and within Canada, because when we go to school, formal education, we learn all about the history of Canada and specific events that happen between Indigenous peoples and the settlers as just following first contact. And we keep seeing the recorded events as recorded from, of course, those who were able to read and write at the time. So, of course, the majority of the time it was from the one-sided settler view that history is recorded because, of course, as Indigenous people here in Canada, uh, being very much oral tradition oriented, where everything is passed down by word of mouth and by through the oral history and through stories and legends and the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next, especially as Nihiawak, as Cree peoples here in Alberta. But for myself, I can only speak for what I've known growing up as a Nihio, as a Cree person, as a Cree Métis person. So I'll just tell you a little bit about how knowledge is transferred within Cree Métis culture. So traditionally, like I said, we are very much oral tradition oriented, where knowledge is passed by word of mouth and by teaching and by showing and by stories and legends. This is how we record our history and we pass it down, either in story and legends or in knowledge about events that happened in our past and the passing of those events. Now, for Nihilak, as Cree people, anything that's passed down to us, any of these stories of events that have happened, we have no doubt about the truth or the facts that are passed down to us. Because as an oral tradition, we know that our knowledge keepers and elders are tasked with holding accurate history and accurate recording of our traditional ways and our traditional history. And we never question whether anything they say is not factual, or question if it's factual or not. We just accept it as this is the way it was. Because with our Gihtiak, our elders, uh, they are held in such high reverence that within the teachings that they've gained, they can't, they know how highly it's regarded and how highly that job is of making sure that accurate teachings, accurate stories are passed down and never lost throughout time. So, of course, when two cultures come together, there's often two sides of events as they happen. And it was no different uh, here with the stories that I've grown up with from my my elders, when they talk about the legends and the interactions between uh, Nihiawak, the Cree peoples, and the settlers as they came into our territories. So events are often very conflicting of events that we see that are recorded as official history in the history books or as written history, because, like I said, they were recorded primarily through the settler side, not from the indigenous perspective. So, just to sort of give you an idea of conflicting events, I'm going to talk about a very specific event that, for myself, the story of this event was passed down from elders uh, whose family members were present at this event. So they've passed on their Nihio, their Cree person perspective of that event. And this event is the Frog Lake Massacre. So if we look at the colonization of Canada and the coming of the settlers, we see certain events as recorded by the settlers. And the Frog Lake Massacre was no different. Of course, we read in the history books that the Frog Lake Massacre happened on April 2nd, 1885, and then it goes on to explain the events from the perspective of non Indigenous settlers at the time. Uh, so I've just taken the accounts of the event off of Wikipedia, which most of us know how to use. We just Google it, and first thing that comes up is Wikipedia's uh, record of whatever subject matter we put. So it says with the Frog Lake Massacre, which occurred on April 2nd, 1885, the account is that a group of armed Cree men led by the war chief Wandering Spirit took Thomas Quinn hostage in his home in the early morning of April 2nd. The Cree then took control of the community, looting various stores and eating food. Many of the white settlers in the settlement attended the local Catholic church where two priests conducted Mass with natives attending. After Mass concluded at around 11 o'clock a.m., Wandering Spirit ordered the whites to move to a native encampment a couple of kilometers away. Quinn repeatedly said that he would not be moved. In response, Wandering Spirit shot him in the head. After that, despite Big Bear's attempt to stop the shooting, Wandering Spirit's group killed another 8 unarmed people. The two Catholic priests, Leon Fafard and Felix Marchand, Farfand's lay assistant John Williscroft, as well as John Goantlock, John Delaney, William Gilchrist, George Dill, and Charles Goen. A Hudson Bay Company clerk, William Blaisdell Cameron, who had been made to go to the church after Mass, had gone to the Hudson Bay shop to fill an order made by Quinn for a miserable man. When the first shots were fired, he escaped with the help of sympathetic Cree and made his way to a nearby Wood Creek camp, where the chief protected him. After the 9 people were killed, Wandering Spirit's men took captive the surviving whites and government loyalists in the community. The hostages numbered 70, including Teresa Gowanlock and Teresa Delaney, wives of the two slain men and their children, as well as William Cameron and several Métis men, John Pritchard, Pierre Blondin, Dolphus Nolan, and Louis Goulet. These men purchased the two windows to put them under Pritchard's protection, to which they possibly owed their lives. The two Teresas later wrote a book on the experience, Two Moths in the Camp of Big Bear. William Cameron's book, Blood Red, the Sun, also gives account of the killings and their aftermath. Henry Ross Halpin, a long-serving Hudson Bay Company official, was at Frog Lake that day. He became one of the hostages and was held for 6 weeks, during a part of which he acted as Big Bear's secretary. He later spoke in defense of Big Bear. So that is the official account of the Frog Lake Massacre and the accounts that we see written in the history books. Even though there are many different accounts of this event, written accounts, they are all given from the non-Indigenous perspective and the perspective of the settlers at the time. So, in hearing the stories of the Frog Lake Massacre from Githdeak elders who were with relatives that were taking part in the massacre at the time, we get a very different account of what happened and what led up to the Frog Lake Massacre. Because what the official account is, what led up to the massacre was, of course, the Métis resistance and what was happening with Louis Riel in 1885 in in the Red River and Duck Lake area at the time. That sort of led up to this incident. However, there were so many different things going on at this time, and our elders tell us uh, of this period in history and our oral tradition, the stories that are passed down to us talk about this, the tensions that were created and the bad feelings uh, that were created, especially amongst the Métis and the Cree peoples in my area, where non-Indigenous people were coming in and pretty well taking our homes, taking our land, telling us we couldn't hunt, telling us we couldn't practice our spiritual, religious ways, and pretty much creating that environment for conflict. However, with this specific events, our elders are pretty clear on what led up to this specific event in Frog Lake. And like I said, you just heard the official recorded historical account of what of the events of what led up to and what happened during that Frog Lake massacre, what they call it. Now, in what my elders tell me, elders from Frog Lake, when they were talking about it, they said it's actually a very different situation that was occurring at that time on April 2nd of 1885 in Frog Lake. The story that they passed down of what happened is that what led up to that event was that the Frog Lake Cree peoples at the time they were treated harshly, they were being starved, rations were being withheld from them, but that's not what caused this specific event. Uh, they said that a lot of what happened during the event and being recorded was true. That's what happened with the taking of hostages and the holding of people. But what led up to it was very different than what's described, and it seems very much so that a lot of that was specifically left out. And when I heard this account from our oral tradition and our knowledge carriers passing this story down, I was shocked because their story of what happened at Frog Lake at the time was that the local priest in the area had done bad things and attacked one of the children, one of the young girls in the Frog Lake Cree community. And he was, of course, the parents of that young girl, and of course the rest of the Frog Lake Cree wanted to serve justice on this priest for doing these bad things to this young girl. And they said it was a young girl of like 11 or 12 years old that this priest had done things to. So, of course, the people rallied together and they went to go after this priest to serve justice on this priest that had done these horrible things. And when they were going to go after this priest, the local Indian agent, which of course the official accounts uh, name him as Thomas Quinn, uh, protected the priest and prevented the local Crees from seeking out justice or instilling justice against this priest. So, of course, Thomas Quinn, uh, trying to defend and protect this priest and trying to, um, I guess, stop them from serving justice. Of course, the locals had taken their revenge on him as well, and they shot him for trying to protect this priest who done this horrible things. Our elders also tell us that along with Thomas Quinn, um, once they got rid of him, the rest of the locals in the church and in the community, the non-indigenous community, started protecting this priest and trying to stop this justice from being carried out. So of course, a number of different people were shot. A lot of different people um, were had I guess the frontier justice taken out on them for trying to protect this priest. And of course, that led up to all the other events with the holding of the hostages, and then with the army being called in to dispel the group or get rid of the group that was holding these hostages. Uh, the most important thing is what led up to the event. From our elders and their spoken record and oral record of the events are very different than what we see recorded in the written historical record, because you see in all of the records I've searched through, looking through the reports and the eyewitness account, not one of them mentioned the situation about what happened with the local priest and the young girl. And from our side, that was, I guess, the driving force behind what happened during that Frog Lake massacre. And so from our Niheo side, our Cree side, we're saying that no, this record of historical events is uh, very conflicting. It doesn't share all of the facts. It really gets shared in such a way that the local Métis and Cree people are really looked at as the instigators of this attack, and that they were very much driven by greed and hunger and really putting it in a way that the Cree people were doing something unjust. When from our side, if we really look at the facts that were passed down through oral tradition, it really changes the whole situation and the whole outlook on those historical events, because then we start to understand um, the anger in the people of the Cree peoples of Frog Lake at the time, when having had one of their something wrong done, very wrong done to one of their children, and just coming up and doing and trying to serve out that very basic community and parental obligation by making sure our children were protected and that any wrongs done on them are dealt with and that justice is served. So, like I said, these are two very conflicting records of events. And like I said, when I first heard this recollection of our elders from Frog Lake, I was shocked because I had grown up with that uh, written record, the one that's written in our history books, and I thought this is unbelievable. This is why wasn't this brought up in the historical accounts, the written historical accounts, or in our history books in Canada? Why was nothing mentioned of that? There are a lot of other small discrepancies that were uh, that were very different from the written recollection. You see, the even the Wikipedia account tells about Big Bear being present, and that Big Bear took a big part in the Frog Lake massacre. However, from our elders' recorded history and their oral tradition and the recollection of events, it was actually Big Bear's son, Little Bear, who was actually left in charge of Frog Lake from his father, Big Bear, who was actually present at that time. And it was Little Bear who actually played a part in this Frog Lake massacre. So you see there again those small discrepancies, but from our oral tradition, like I said, as Cree peoples, we hold our elders and our knowledge keepers in very high regard. So we never question the records that they have of events or stories or knowledge that is passed. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that just to show one, this is just one instance where we have conflicting histories recorded. Uh, so I wonder how many other events have similar situations where, because they were recorded by the settlers, they're recorded in very different ways, and events are only recorded from the eyes of one side when the two cultures came together. So I just wanted to discuss that a little and just give you a sort of idea about conflicting histories and conflicting accounts, especially when we're dealing with a culture or a peoples that are very strongly rooted in the oral tradition. So thanks for listening today. I hope you learned something, and I hope you really start to question our history and how things are recorded. So thanks for listening. Kinanaskum tinawaw kah